Mabuhay, Kamustika. Welcome. How are you? This is Bob from Love Beyond the Sea. Glad to have you here tonight. It's a little bit past my usual live stream stay up time, but I'm going to try doing these live streams a couple of hours later. Instead of 5 o'clock Central Time, USA, we'll move it back to 7 p.m. And hopefully that will allow more people to watch and hopefully to interact. And this time I'm going to try it in two different parts tonight, 7 p.m. Central Time, 9 a.m. the next day in the Philippines. And so, it's not going to be as long, partly because I'd like to get some comments and some interaction going. And then tomorrow, Thursday, same time, 7 p.m., we can do part two of generation gap and the younger wife. Generation gap and the younger wife. So I'd like to do another video about the age gap controversy that comes up whenever an older foreign man is pursuing a Filipina. It's controversial because although many men would prefer a younger wife, a younger Filipina, they don't generally always try to find one. And when such a couple is seen in public, there are the usual characterizations and assumptions about them. Now, I do have a playlist of about a half dozen videos on the younger wife topic so far, and I will remember to put that in the description box at the end of this before it's all up there tonight. So if anybody hasn't seen any of those or didn't know about them, you can take a look at that. Please subscribe to Love Beyond the Sea, where I will address as much as I can about having a relationship with a Filipina. I do not mention Filipina in the title tonight, but this channel is designed to help foreign men and Filipinas. Now, I married a Filipina 27 years younger back in 2015. And we think we are doing well. We both realize how our strengths and weaknesses impact our relationship. And I think this is the first time I have done a live stream focusing on having a younger wife. So this is your chance to speak up and comment on this situation, ask questions, or share your experiences. One of my subscribers actually suggested the topic of the generation gap and having a younger wife. So I hope I do justice to the topic. And if I don't, please comment. If I leave something out, please comment. Age gap is a topic that could chew up a lot of time, a lot more time than we can allocate tonight, because it is fascinating. Some age gap relationships work, while some aren't as successful, and it is interesting to pry into why that might be. Let's just start by looking at two similar descriptions of what a generation gap is. The age gap is one thing, being 20, 30 years older than the woman. That's not necessarily what causes the issues. More likely, it's something in the generation gap, as I hope you will see tonight. And if you agree, please share your own ideas about generation gap. I'll just get it started with some that I thought of. But here is: generation gap is defined as a lack of communication between one generation and another, especially between young people and their parents, brought about by differences of tastes, values, outlook, etc. Another one is the years separating one generation from the generation that precedes or follows it, especially when regarded as representing the difference in outlook and the lack of understanding between them. So certainly this could, come up in a foreigner Filipina relationship with an age gap. Please keep in mind that as I begin this, and be prepared to comment, of course, on what generation gap challenges there could be between a foreigner and a younger Filipina. And I'll continue it tomorrow. So just mention a few things tonight and think about what you think are generational challenges. I admit it has been difficult for me to separate the age gap challenges from the generation gap aspect. and what that would be. Now, years ago, maybe this isn't such an issue, but today it is possible there are more generational gap issues to deal with. Those of you who have been parents would be helpful in clarifying some issues, so be ready to share your thoughts. It isn't a surprise that an older generation with these differences might not always be naturally compatible with a younger one. At work, for example, I work with younger people sometimes, definitely from a different generation. And when I was younger, I worked with people of an older generation. It is imperative to work together to get along, at least, even if you feel like your coworkers from the moon or from Mars. For 8 or more hours a day, you just have to learn to be able to work for a common goal. Then you are allowed to go home. Obviously, with employment, once the bell rings or the work is done, you go your separate ways to be with someone or to search for someone to call your partner in life. I have known people from an older generation in my adult years, and I generally got along with them. Again, in certain controlled settings, it is possible to unite with someone of a different generation and get along, to agree on many things despite some differences. Should people always look for someone within a few years of each other to marry, at risk of being foolish? Well, I think it depends. If someone has already engaged in an age gap relationship, let's say they're married, does that mean it's just a matter of time before their marriage becomes unraveled because the weight of the differences between them gets to be too much? Again, it depends. I'll try to make it clear from my perspective what success depends on. There are differences to deal with in an age gap relationship of the same nationality, possibly others with someone from a different country and culture. How important is this? It depends. There are always going to be differences between a man and a woman of the same age, from the same city, same culture, same education level, same friends, and even with some similar core beliefs. People are different. We all understand that. Yet somehow they must band together in various circumstances for a common good. You get to decide if the differences between you and the younger Filipina or any younger woman are going to be insurmountable or not. You can spend as much time as you like trying to discern those differences, or in our case, getting married in less than 8 weeks. You know you will discover differences maybe you could have known about with more time dating each other. But, what we did was decide to work out any differences after we got married. And, during that time, we would be getting to know each other. Since, our engagement or pre-marriage time was so short. So this would mean that we made a conscious or unconscious decision to manage the differences as they become apparent, and believe that we would be able to do that. But what if these generational differences are deal breakers? Who says they have to be deal breakers? It doesn't have to. That all depends on 2 key factors, as far as I can tell, and they are related to each other, so they might as well be synonymous. One is maturity, and the other one is love, and that is the love that puts feelings aside and focuses on action. Notice I didn't mention how we feel, how we are treated, or if our ego gets stroked. Large age gap marriages do work for many people, likely more than we know, because they aren't on YouTube celebrating their relationship, or in my case, wanting to help guys know what they are getting into should they pursue a younger Filipina. So, should they look for a younger Filipina? It depends on the man's wisdom and maturity. I'm going to list some common age gap differences, generation gap differences too, that can irritate and frustrate people with this gap between them, and how being wise and mature allows them to work around these differences. These are not going to be in any particular order. Let's call a generation gap, by the way, roughly 20 to 22 years. And as I list these, if you think of others, and I'm sure I will miss some even continuing this tomorrow, then please let me know. One of them I actually thought about last night before I fell asleep. I don't know how. Oh, it's apple cider vinegar and cold water. I really like that stuff. I don't know why. It tastes better than water, I guess. But last night I was thinking, what about humor? Is there a generational gap with humor? And I would say there probably is. You know, the jokes that we told when we were in our 20s, or what was funny, or what was even talked about in our 20s, maybe is a lot different than it is today. So it's possible that, you know, what we consider humorous, they might consider really corny or not funny at all. And some women, in fact, it seems like here in America, most women say that one of the most important things to them is a sense of humor. I can think of things that to me would be a lot more important than that. But if it's a sense of humor that is important to a woman, then if she's marrying an older foreigner, um, you know, maybe his humor might not be for her. Maybe her sense of humor he finds dull and uninteresting. Who knows? But that's one possibility. I listed culture here. There are issues in the culture to deal with. And today, especially in the Philippines, there is sex change, for example. Sex change is common. Confusion of sexual orientation to a degree that I find disturbing. I don't know what role the parents have had in all of this, but it's very possible the younger Filipina you want to marry someday doesn't think that this is such a big deal. Um, in all likelihood, she knows ladyboys, and you might think this is reprehensible. You know, I would want to know about this before I got married. Now, I have a feeling it was popular in the Philippine culture before it became popular here in America, where I live. I didn't know anything about all of this stuff before I married my wife, but you know, that is part of the culture that the younger Filipina is growing up in. And so, you know, you might want to ask her about that. You know, whether you would live in the Philippines or in America, you should be prepared to talk about this, especially if you want to have children, because you know, you want to bring them up in the same way. I don't sense any outrage about this in the Philippines, but if you have strong feelings against this, I think you have to let her know, children or not. Can you imagine the friction if one parent thinks a child's sex is obvious and the other parent thinks the child can choose what they want to be? I think that would be disastrous. The younger Filipina you are interested in perhaps has a degree and has been working to support her family. You might have plans to settle down with her and spend ample time each day together and might not even need her to work. However, it is her cultural responsibility to work to provide for her family, and you aren't going to win this one. If she doesn't get a job, then you will need to provide the support. You are aware there's a lot of poverty in the Philippines, and you are glad that you were able to lift her from this situation. Just be aware that it is not to bring this up, you know, the poverty, for example. Filipinos have pride. They do the best they can. She probably wasn't discontent if she was poor, and she probably doesn't dream of becoming rich either. She won't like the Philippines being referred to as a third world country. If you want her to act dignified, then she needs to be treated in a dignified way. Now, it's also quite possible as a young Filipina, she grew up watching her mother take the financial responsibility and run the affairs of the house. And I have also read that sometimes it is the mother who inflicts the greater physical punishment, that is to say, discipline, on the child. When she, I mean, often she just runs the home. So, you know, if you probably, if you have children or want to have children, should talk about this in her culture. I guess at least she's younger. She's seen things, a way of doing things that might not be the way you want things to be done. So something else to talk about, because that's all she's observed is her own family dynamics growing up in the Philippines. One thing here that isn't a generational gap thing, but it is an age gap thing, and that would be a difference in energy level. And let's just get this one out of the way right away. A younger woman is going to have already or eventually more energy. What should she do with it? I think she should be encouraged to do what she finds fulfilling. If she isn't already doing that, I would talk to her about what that might be. If I try to get her to spend an inappropriate amount of time and energy with me, that could lead to resentment on her part. There will come a time in an age gap relationship, especially in marriage, where I will need my wife to naturally be spending more time helping me manage in my later years. And here's a good thing about marrying a Filipina. She comes from a culture where the elderly are respected and older husbands are taken care of. If I am wise, mature, I will allow her to accomplish what she deems important in her life, and rest assured, a big part of that is helping her family financially. I see that as making deposits in an account that I will need to withdraw from later in life. I want to treat her in a way that makes it possible for her to be with me in old age. I can help her by helping her avoid burning out or spending too much time with things that are not important. And by the way, I don't think Filipinas have a reputation for spending their time doing frivolous things. If she does, she is too young or immature to be married yet. Again, your energy and vitality is declining, and treat her well, and it will help you later in life. These other things here are not so much physical. Now, how about tattoos and piercings? And this is something that I also just thought about recently. Hi, Ken. How are you doing tonight? Postcards from Cebu. Yeah, I am live here, Ken. Thanks for joining me, talking about an aspect of the age gap, in this case, generation gap. And like I said earlier, it's not always the numbers and the age difference that are a big factor. It may be, inside of that, what about the age difference, that generation difference could cause trouble. So I'm just trying to throw out some things here tonight. I thought about tattoos and piercings to add to this list because, well, I think that's to me this would fit the topic. Recently, I went to buy some pizza over here at the local Hy-Vee, and the young girl who worked there had some kind of thing in her upper or lower lip. I don't know what it was. It was like a nose ring for the lip. Now, she was cute and didn't need to do anything extra for her appearance, but it made me wonder what I would think if I was interested in a Filipina who had her, eyebrows pierced, a nose ring, something in her lip. Some women even pierce their tongues. For some reason, with a younger generation, this phenomenon seems to exist. Someone my age in America could do things like this, but normally it is someone from a younger generation. Personally, a nose ring is something I probably could be okay with it. I've never, been spooked out by that. If she looks good in it, go for it. That's not a big deal to me. It works for some women, it doesn't work for others. But other than that, I can't find anything attractive about this kind of thing. And they can put these piercings all over their body. And perhaps this cat hasn't caught on yet in the Philippines. I would be concerned that they might keep adding other embellishments that I don't like. Sometimes people get carried away and can't stop. And you could add tattoos to this list too. Some men might not care at all, but for me, I prefer that that Filipino I married not have tattoos. It might be okay if it was small. Then again, how can you guarantee she won't get carried away and not be able to stop? Because there's women here in America that have it all over their bodies, and not talking about the old traditional tattoos that someone my age grew up with, but I think they call it body art now because it literally looks like body art. So tattoos, piercings, if you find a younger Filipina and you're interested in her, what are you going to think if she has certain tattoos on her? Tattoos, piercings, something that kind of catches you off guard. Another thing, we should always mention the sexual aspect of this. If you're married to a younger Filipino, your sex life might not be the same as what she might, hear her younger friends tossing around. And as you age, it eventually won't be, even what you want it to be. And this area has potential for conflict if the Filipino wants it more than he does, or is more capable than he is. Probably a scammer. Now, that might not be an issue if they were the same age, and this isn't going to be a big issue with some couples. As with everything else, it depends on the Filipina. So think about it, and this can be tagged with the energy category I mentioned earlier. A subscriber shared this quote, and it applies here, so I will use it. He said, if you decided to take up jogging, would you go join a couple of 19-year-olds to go running with? My answer would be not unless you're in the shape and condition of a 19-year-old. This doesn't preclude a good intimate relationship with a younger woman. It just means that the better shape you're in, the better that will tend to be from a physical standpoint. Now, as you know, my wife is 27 years younger, and that's what I wanted. I was looking, if I could find somebody to marry, I preferred that they would be younger. I felt that at 53, she was 26, that wasn't extreme and it was doable because 26-year-old will have some maturity on her. And I think when the more mature she is, the more you hear age is just a number. So that's just, it's not really a generational thing. I mean, it is, but it's also an age gap issue. She might not care at all, for example, if he uses Viagra or Cialis or whatever else, and she might not, but she also might not think that he's attracted to her. So she might think it's a strange thing to do. As money is a hot topic with Filipinas, I think that sex is too. And this is a topic that needs to be discussed if there might be an issue with the older man's performance. I'm never worried about the younger Filipina. Now, general interests. She might have and probably will have different interests because she is from a different generation. And that's good as long as they don't conflict with the possibility of having a long-term committed relationship, which I consider marriage. Now, yes, I believe you can trust a Filipina who is much younger than you are. If her interests are not necessarily up your alley, it's not always a big deal. There are things that she has interests in, and you have things that are interesting to you. They don't have to be shared as much as they have to be appreciated and respected. Talk about what her interests are while dating and why they're interesting to her, and try to understand her. Now, one thing for sure that we just simply cannot go without mentioning about generation gap here is social media. Social media will almost assuredly be something a younger Filipina will be consumed with. At least that is likely how it will appear to the man who doesn't share that same passion. It seems that younger people everywhere have cell phones, computers, tablets, laptops, and would find it very difficult to decrease its use. Yes, this takes time out of your relationship, but I think it needs to be allowed as long as it doesn't become a problem. She is used to talking to her friends and family, and that's not going to stop. Hopefully the hours she calls them isn't a problem between you, since there's a sizable time zone difference. Now, social media has also affected the younger generation today in a very important way, and that's the way they interact to each other or to anyone face to face. I think they're not learning like we used to by having civil discussions about things they disagree on, because they often don't do it face to face today. It is much easier to disagree or avoid something by merely, clicking a delete button or a hide button. People say things online they wouldn't say in person. This definitely could be something affecting the younger Filipina you want to be with. Because I heard 20 years ago that probably before the internet or just before the internet, and certainly before all these smartphones, that younger people were losing the ability to communicate because, they're probably talking on their their cell phones a lot. Now you got smartphones where you can get on the internet. And I think it's even worse. I mean, how can you have a good relationship with somebody that does most of their talking, behind a phone or a keyboard? So of all the things that I, mention tonight or probably mention tomorrow, this one might be one of the more serious ones, and that's social media and how it affects her ability to deal with issues and problems. Because if she's in a relationship with the older foreigner, she can't just, ignore him or delete him. So we only have so much time for all of our various interests. So if her interests aren't opposed to yours, just be sure there's no conflict of interest. As for Filipina, she is interested in a better life as far as security for herself, helping her family experience a measure of that, and being loved by someone who can accept this. She can make a great wife, as many of us, including myself, know. Her youth, her lack of life experience, means that she will see things from a different perspective than an older man, and she really can't help that. A generational gap exists. A Filipina likely wants to mature at a normal rate, so the older man, in my opinion, must not try to get her to catch up with him, so to speak, or treat her like a child by making snide remarks. If you want a younger woman, you have to be prepared for the possibility of some views she has or things she likes that you think are just plain silly. She also doesn't want to be controlled and wants to be treated the same as in any other relationship. She will have the outlook on life of a woman from a different generation. I don't have children, so it's hard for me to quickly recognize an issue that could be from differences due to a generation gap. So, please comment on this so we can talk about it. A generation gap is more problematic if there are significant changes during that time in values and priorities. Sometimes a person from a younger generation hasn't quite figured out what they believe in or what's important to them. In all likely, the older foreigner, kind of settled that a long time ago. We can also talk about anything relating to the age gap. I think this might be the first live stream I've done with that topic, even though I've got, a handful of videos that I'll put in the playlist that talk about being married to a younger wife. So part of me wants to believe that generation gap differences might be different with Filipinas than Western women, but I'm not sure. I was hoping somebody would be around and be able to talk about that. Is it a generation gap different with Filipinas? Are they more mature? Are they more traditional? And so with the Filipina, maybe it's not as big of a concern. I married a younger Filipina. As far as our generational gap things, my wife is very mature, and we have similar interests in entertainment, so that's not a problem for us. To me, I haven't noticed a lot of issues, and I know some people have. Is it because of the age, or is it because of the generation? So tomorrow night, 7:00, which would be about 9 a.m. the next day in the Philippines, we'll be talking about some other things, technology, education, music, dancing, entertainment, clothing, so on and so forth. Generational gap differences that could be problematic if you are looking for a younger Filipina. And there's nothing wrong with looking for a younger Filipina. It's just important to be able to treat her with respect and really to not treat her as if she is a younger Filipina. I don't look at my wife as being younger and us having an age gap. She's my wife. Probably, she looks at me being her husband as just being her husband. Certainly in the almost 4 years of marriage, she has never even brought up that topic to me. So I did have a subscriber that wanted me to talk about generation gap, and just to keep it from going too long, I wanted to break it down into tonight and tomorrow night, 7 p.m. So, Ken, I appreciate you being here. We're trying out 7 p.m. tonight because 5 o'clock, I've had more people come and join me online, but I realize some people are also still at work or coming home from work or trying to unwind. And so for the time being, for a while, I'm going to try it at 7 p.m. And if it doesn't work out, then I suppose we go back to 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. Who knows what really works out best. So appreciate the people that watched last time, 2 weeks ago, about Tampo. Hopefully you learned from that. I really believe that was the best way to deal with the situation. And tomorrow night, we'll continue this 7 p.m. talking about generation gap and the younger wife. So if you see this and you want to make some comments, be ready for tomorrow night. Until then, good night. This is Bob from Love Beyond the Sea.